So the NFL Combine, it's in the novels. And we have confirmed quite a few things that we thought pre-Combine, and there were very little changes to most of the things that I've already put on record up to this point. But what I will say is this. Your rookie drafts are going to be fun as shit, as long as you have some, sprinkled in some picks in the top 15, top 20. It confirmed that rookie drafts are going to be great this year. It confirmed that the wide receiver class is this is the best wide receiver class, at least pre-draft as prospects, in quite a long time. We are going to see a minimum of 5 wide receivers go in the first round, but it would not surprise me if we saw up to 7 or 8 of them go in the first round. It would not surprise me if we saw 4 or 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. But this combine was a fun combine to watch. So we've got a lot of wide receivers going crazy. I'm going to try to recap most of what I think is important for the combine. I'm going to recap what changes have been made in my rankings. My initial rookie rankings are live right now. I actually posted them on Twitter for free for any of you guys that want to go and follow me there. And you might see this video after the group video that we did of the combine recap. You might see this before. I'm not really sure what our schedule is this week, so I apologize if you hear the takes being doubled down on, but I'm here to fucking stand on business, all right? And let's talk about Xavier Worthy first. We're going to get into a lot of different names, but I think the picture of this combine was Xavier Worthy, who ran a 4.21 and broke the combine record for the fastest 40-yard dash ever, previously held by John Ross. This is a perfect example of where the combine matters and where it doesn't. So I have been on record that I was an Adonai Mitchell over Worthy guy as a prospect, and it wasn't even close for me. When I watched Xavier Worthy, I thought he left a lot to be desired as a prospect. I don't think his route running is very technical. I don't think that he is a great all-around receiver outside of being wildly explosive down the field. That was obvious for anyone who's turned the tape on for about 6 seconds. The problem with a lot of the garbage content that we consume in the Dynasty community is, like, most people I don't think know how to watch tape or watch prospects whatsoever, because if you type in Xavier Worthy on Twitter right now, you'll see 6 dudes all with like Dynasty in their handle, and all of them will be like Xavier Worthy, nuanced route runner, great contact balance. It's like they just went to ChatGPT and be like, what do people in Dynasty talk about? And they give them buzzwords, and then they put them for every prospect. Xavier Worthy, not a great all-around wide receiver. Great speed guy. We all fucking knew that. So him running a 4.21, of course, is like out of control. Out of control. Literally the best to ever do it at the combine. But that does not change anything for me. He is my wide receiver 11 in this class. He was my, wide receiver. He might even move down after the combine, to be completely honest with you, because this did not do anything for me in terms of learning more about Xavier Worthy. Maybe that solidifies him draft capital where he gets into the first round, and then we can possibly have a more nuanced discussion about it. But when I look at Xavier Worthy, and he came out, more athletic, and he has a better production profile, but I'm nervous about what role he's going to have in the NFL outside of like a downfield guy. Now, when we look at Adonai Mitchell, who tested out insanely as well, came in 6'2", 205 pounds, and we didn't even talk about Xavier Worthy came in at 165 pounds. 165 pounds, 5'11". That's worrisome. We have seen over recent years lighter dudes succeed. So I'm actually less worried about his size, even though it is a concern for sure, and more of just what I saw in film from Xavier Worthy in his lack of well-roundedness as a wide receiver. So 165 pounds, that's a little worrisome. Adonai Mitchell, his teammate at Texas, on the other hand, 205 pounds, 6'2", dude ran a 4.35. And I got to say, like, there's been everybody jumping out of the woodworks now that they're huge fans of AD Mitchell. I've been kind of, he's been my wide receiver for a month now. As soon as I turned his tape on, I was like, I'm in love with this guy. He did not move after the combine. He was the wide receiver 4, my 8th overall player. Post-combine, he is now still the wide receiver 4, my 8th overall player. And my comp for him was Terry McLaurin, which I think I fucking nailed, because my thing was like, he is such a smooth route runner. He will have the speed, but nobody, like, when you think about Terry McLaurin, what do you guys, I don't even know if most people know what Terry McLaurin ran at the combine. He ran a 4.35. That is so fucking fast. That is like elite speed. But nobody thinks of Terry McLaurin and thinks he is a downfield speedster and like that's his prototype. No, you think of Terry McLaurin as a possession receiver, a really smooth route runner that also has speed in his bag if he wants to unleash it. That is how I saw AD Mitchell, and now that showed up at the combine. Now we're seeing that all over Twitter. So AD Mitchell, for me, again, he's a winner, I guess you could say. I think what he did was solidify his round 1 draft capital status. So that makes me feel really good about where I had him pre-combine. So when you start looking around the other wide receivers and their performances at the combine, we have Brian Thomas out of LSU, Malik Neighbors' teammate, who I think pretty much solidified himself as a top 20 pick realistically. Came in at 6'3", 209 pounds, and ran a 4.33 40-yard dash. Again, like, we knew if you watched any semblance of tape on Brian Thomas, that dude runs like a fucking falcon. Nah, I'm not talking Atlanta. I'm talking, that doesn't even make sense because Falcons don't run, but he flies. He flies down the field. He gallops down the field like a fucking horse. His strides are 10 yards each. So him running a 4.33 is surprising in the fact that that's wildly fast, but I think we knew he was wildly fast coming in. That solidified 6'3", 210, great size. I think he could be an unbelievable fit in an offense like Buffalo with Josh Allen, where they need a good version of Gabriel Davis to really unlock that offense. And there's a part of the combine where I think for the most part, the biggest movers, there were very few movers in my ranks post-combine. It was Audric Estime, the Notre Dame running back, who I wasn't overly high on. I think I had him as like my RB5 pre-combine. He ended up running like a 4.72 or 4.73, which is quite unacceptable for a running back entering the NFL. So the thing I said about Audric Estime, and I don't want to actually go into his shit now, but fuck it, we will. Audric Estime, one of the first things I wrote down in my notes while I was watching this film was his brain moves faster than his legs do. He is a really solid college running back. He has really good vision, understands how to use his leverage with his blockers, and he gets to the hole and he makes plays because he's big and he could shed blockers. But again, his brain, like his vision is better than his athletic ability allows him to be. And I think we saw that come out with the combine, in which like that type of 4.73 speed is not legit NFL athleticism. And that was something we see on film. It translates into the athletic scoring, but that's like a parameter there. Had he run like a 4.61, I would have been like, perfect. That's probably what I estimated him. I estimated Estime to run. But now he's kind of like off the spectrum where it's like you have to move him down a little bit because of that. So he dropped from like RB5, I think, down to RB7 or 8 for me, where it's like, okay, now I'm taking a shot on a guy that would be a major outlier based on that athleticism. Lad McConkey was another one that moved up for me. Knew he was quick twitch, knew he was, a nuanced route runner, knew that he was like a relatively explosive athlete. But for him to run a 4.39 is... it's something else. That's otherworldly. I do worry about him getting pushed around again. He comes in at a $186. We've seen, wide receivers that are relatively skinny kind of like succeed in the league or whatever. I don't think he was a great outside perimeter receiver. I think he'd be phenomenal in the slot. I don't look at him as like a Julian Edelman or like a Wes Welker type. I think Brett Coleman had a great comp from when he said he was like Emmanuel Sanders, and Emmanuel Sanders had a great 40 time as well, where he's fast, he's nuanced, he could play inside and outside, but I think he's probably best suited to be an inside player. Lad McConkey, for sure, a winner at the combine. He has been kind of like rising up the ranks in the pre-draft process. He went from probably, I think, my wide receiver, maybe like 9 or 10, I think, up to 7-ish in that range. So he is flying up, and I think what he probably did was cement himself as like a very, very early day 2 pick. But with this speed, like the parameters, the same way that I touched on like Audric Estime, like that is a red flag when you're all the way up in the 4.7s. There's no exponential return. Like you don't get extra returns from going from a 4.35 down to a 4.29 down to a 4.21. So with Xavier Worthy, and this is something I tweeted last night, the fastest wide receiver 40-yard dashes ever at the combine. Xavier Worthy 4.21, John Ross 4.22, Rondell Menendez 4.24, Jerome Mathis 4.26, Marquise Goodwin 4.27, Henry Ruggs 4.27. Hashtag predictive analytics. Like that type of speed doesn't actually fucking matter as a football player. If he ran, my ranking of him would not have changed if he ran anywhere from a 4.15 up to a 4.38. Like it didn't matter. We already knew that was what his game was. So him running faster and faster and faster doesn't change anything. I think it matters when you watch film of someone and they're really fast and then they run slowly, or you don't feel like you saw the explosion and then all of a sudden they showed a ton of explosion in the 40-yard dash. That's when I think it's time to kind of recalibrate and relook at what you saw on film. So again, the Xavier Worthy, him going down tenths of a second shouldn't matter whatsoever to anybody in the rookie rankings, because we knew that the best part of his game was always going to be his explosion and his downfield playmaking, even though that's the other problem I have with Worthy. And here's the thing. I don't want this has become like an Xavier Worthy get shit on video. And the only reason I'm making so many of these points points is because, again, everybody's so positive about everybody in the Dynasty community. I remember going back to last year. And I made a complete thread about the prospects I was watching in real time on Twitter as I was watching them. And the first tweet I ever put into that thread was Marvin Mims might be the worst wide receiver prospect I will watch this year. And I don't think I saw a single piece of negative propaganda about Marvin Mims the entire offseason last year, from the combine all the way through like the end of the season until his stats finally rolled in. There were people bragging and flexing about having Marvin Mims ranked as their wide receiver 2 in the rookie class last year. I wanted to go out on a limb because it literally took me, I felt like 3 minutes of tape watching to be like, this guy is not versatile whatsoever. He runs 3 routes and they are down the field, across the field, and screen passes. He's not nuanced as a route runner. All he does is run across the field very fast, and he is very fast. That played itself out, I think. So those are the types of takes that I feel like I need to make because I don't think there's a lot of people in this community that know what the fuck they're looking at when they're watching film. So with Xavier Worthy, like, okay, people are going to talk about Keon Coleman, right? Keon Coleman ran, I think, like a 4.61, 4.62, and that's not a great time for him, but he never wins on downfield speed. He is not an explosive playmaker down the field in terms of raw speed. He wins at the point of the catch, and his jumps were really good, and his speed in the gauntlet was really good. Like these other things that actually probably matter for Keon Coleman, he was fine with. And you know who had more downfield catches, more deep catches than Xavier Worthy this year? Keon Coleman did. Xavier Worthy, I think, had like 4 catches of 20-plus yards this year, air yards, okay? Do you know why? Because 42% of his targets were screen targets. That is the type of player Xavier Worthy is. He is not a nuanced route runner. He is not a nuanced wide receiver. He is I'm so athletic, we just need to get the ball in my hands. That doesn't really work at the NFL level. Like, you have to be a very good, well-rounded wide receiver in the NFL in order to put up really good numbers from a fantasy perspective, which is why, again, I have him down as my 22nd overall ranked player in this rookie class Superflex rankings. My wide receiver 11, which I'm sure is going to get a ton of pushback, and I'm sure most people have him around like 12, 13, 14. I couldn't be happier to be going against consensus when it comes to Xavier Worthy, especially right out of the gate, right post-combine, when everyone's going to love him as much as they possibly can all summer. So Keon Coleman, again, he is my 13th overall ranked player. He's my wide receiver 6. My hesitation is, I guess, his draft capital, where I think he's gotten mocked like as the 25th overall pick in some, but I could see him dropping all the way to like 35, 45, whatever. Situation is going to be a big thing for me when it comes to Keon Coleman. He's not someone I'm like, he's not a hill I'm willing to die on, but I don't think I'm not writing him off because he had a relatively slow 40-yard dash. We look at players like Allen Robinson. We look at, those types of players didn't have good 40-yard dashes either, but that's never how they win on the field anyways. So double counting against him would be idiotic. So if your rankings move dramatically post-combine, that's fine, but it just means you're not good at evaluating prospects as they look on film. And most people in Dynasty only look at production profiles. They only look at like, did this guy have a young breakout age? Cool. Show me all the young breakout ages. I bet you 50% of them are shitty fantasy players anyways. There's very little predictive ability in what these motherfuckers are yelling about on Twitter. So Keon Coleman, I'm fine with. Let's just go down all the wide receivers right now. And we will timestamp every player as well down below. So Lad McConkey was a big winner for me. Jaylen Polk, he ran, I think, a 4.52. Jaylen Polk's a bigger dude out of Washington. He was the teammate of Rome Odunze. He was a guy that I kind of comped to like T. Higgins, where, again, he's not going to kill you with downfield explosion, playmaking ability. But he was someone that I was really, really focusing on to see what his 40 time was, because I didn't know if he was going to come out and run like a 4.68 and be a little bit sluggish, but he showed a really solid amount of explosion with that 4.52 and tells me that he can be a playmaker across the field. He can, and that was like his best attribute in my opinion, where it was like playmaking ability down the field for sure, but then those routes where he's going across the field and you could throw it up, and has this huge catch radius where he'll go up and get it, similar to T. Higgins. So that was a win for me with Jaylen Polk. Troy Franklin ran a 4.41, which it's not speed that you don't see often. Like, that's not overly impressive speed, especially for someone who wins on speed, and he is a downfield playmaker. He's very fluid. I have a little bit of problems with what I saw on tape for him, but he's my 17th overall ranked player. He's my wide receiver 9. I think the rest of his combine in terms of like his short speed, his shuttle, his cone, that kind of stuff was pretty disappointing. Didn't really match what his long speed was. So Those are a little bit more concerning for me in terms of like what kind of pure athlete is he outside of just like downfield playmaking ability. Contested catch ability can be a little iffy. Same thing with Xavier Worthy. So those guys are kind of like the same mold of player in what I expect them to be at the next level. So overall, I would say Troy Franklin's probably, we already knew the speed was going to be there. So 4.41, it's fine. But I wish he kind of tested better on the other things. Xavier Legette from South Carolina, big dude, 221. I think he was the heaviest wide receiver at the combine. Dude ran a fucking 4.39, 40-inch vertical jump. He is explosive. He is fast. And that comes out on film. And I think he's pretty quick twitch. I think he's really good at like stopping on a dime and changing direction and coming back to the ball. I've heard crazy comps of like the DK Metcalf. Definitely wouldn't go that far, but I think he's in the mold of like Jonathan Mingo, but I think he's a better I think I didn't love Jonathan Mingo last year. The draft capital was cool. I like Xavier Legette a lot more than Jonathan Mingo. And the cool thing about this class is that like Jonathan Mingo came in and he was like the first pick of the second round or whatever, or maybe the first receiver of the second round. And he was like the wide receiver 5 or 6 off the board. And this year, Xavier Legette, who has a nice profile, I think his tape is better than Jonathan Mingo's. He's going to end up being like the 12th or 13th wide receiver off the board this year, which is awesome. Right? Like that is like the cool part about this class is it is so deep and it is so high end, pretty much sprinkled throughout, you know? And like last year, Xavier Worthy might have been like my wide receiver 5 or 6 because there weren't as many high quality choices as dudes like Xavier Legette. So Legette was a big winner for me. Ricky Pearsall out of Florida, admittedly, I haven't watched enough of his tape to have a really, really strong grip on his game type, but I know that he was a winner at the combine. So he has dropped into that like back end of 2, early round 3 of rookie draft picks for me, barring where his draft capital goes. And those are probably the standouts for me as it relates to wide receivers. We can jump into the running backs. Jonathan Brooks out of Texas has been my number one. He's obviously recovering from an ACL tear, so he didn't do any work at the combine, but he did weigh in at 216. I think his playing weight was closer to like 207. So I don't really want to read too much into that because it's not like he was running his 40 and we got to see how that weight now translated into like on-field speed. But kind of cool to see, I guess, if Jonathan Brooks is playing at 216, 215, he's a GOAT. He's a fucking GOAT. He's my one. Braelon Allen did not run, which was super fucking disappointing, but he did weigh in at 235, which is not unexpected because he is a mammoth of a human being. MarShawn Lloyd and Trey Benson were like the next 2 dudes that I had in a tier together. And if you watch my like in-depth rookie breakdown video of them, they were my 3 and 4. They were similar players to me in that they're like really explosive, really fun players, but for sure have like vision problems on the field. And again, I go and break down their tape, their actual like game film, all 22 tape in depth in last week's video. So we'll link that down below as well. MarShawn Lloyd came in at 5'9", 220 pounds and ran a 4.46. So again, I comped MarShawn Lloyd and Trey Benson. Both they're both in that same like DeAndre Swift, Miles Sanders frame where it's like they have the build to be 3-down backs. They are well-rounded backs. They are explosive as shit. They are very, very athletic, and that shouldn't be the concern for anybody, which is why MarShawn Lloyd at 220 running a 4.46 is great. Trey Benson at 216, 6 foot, running a 4.39. That was a little bit unexpected, but that shouldn't move them up or down the draft board because like if you're watching film, you know these dudes are extremely athletic and you know they're extremely explosive. So to see them go out there, run a 4.39, 4.4, 4.46 at 215, 220 pounds, if you miss that on tape, that's on you. Like you're just a fucking idiot and don't understand what you're watching when you're watching them. So they had a good but expected combine. Now had Trey Benson or MarShawn Lloyd came out and run like a 4.63, that would be concerning to me because what I liked about them was their explosion, was their athletic profile, was what I expected to translate at the combine. So if they did bad, that would be a problem. So we had Blake Corum, who came in at 205 pounds, and he ran a 4.53, which was fine. I think it's not like overly impressive. It's not out of the range of what I kind of expected him to run. I think he was at like a fucking 4.39 on Prize Picks before the combine even went, which is fucking insane. But again, he's not like an overly athletic back. I think that was probably a better time than I expected him to finish with, so he's not a mover for me. Jaylen Wright, a lot of people love him out of Tennessee. I watched a lot of his film the other day. Jaylen Wright is a dude who wildly explosive, ran a 4.38. Again, it's if you watch his film and that wasn't what you expected, I don't understand what you were watching. So that's one that you cannot double count. Had he gone out there, because there are a lot of parts of his film that I did not like. I think he is an okay inside runner. I think he bounces things outside way too often. I think he goes into like I'm an athlete. I'm going to make a play way too often. And again, with 4.38 speed, sometimes that works. But at the next level, I think that's going to be problematic for staying on the field often because you might miss out on those first and second downs when coaches don't trust you to run up the middle. I think his vision's okay. Playmaking ability's okay. He runs pretty upright, a little bit stiff in my opinion, not super elusive. So I have problems with his game, which is why I have him ranked down. He's my RB6 because he's athletic as shit, but he's down at number 24 overall in my initial Superflex rookie rankings. So him running the 4.38, good, but just confirmed what we had already thought of Jaylen Wright, and that was that his speed and his explosiveness would be the best part of his game. After that, we've got Audric Estime again. He's down at 28 for me now, RB7, and the 4.71 that he ran is that's a tough scene. It's a tough scene for him. So there aren't a lot of successful running backs that ran a 4.7 plus that we have sample sizes of. Usually like the low 4.6s are where you start to see like, okay, this guy can still be pretty good, but maybe capped athletically. Once you start getting in the high 4.6s, low 4.7s, that usually plays itself out over the long run. So that was disappointing. Bucky Irving, another one where like everybody was going nuts about his speed. And when I was watching film, like one of the first things I wrote was like, I expected him to be way faster. Didn't really look explosive to me on film necessarily. Went out, ran a 4.56, I believe, at like 195 pounds. So a weight adjusted speed score that was really, really poor. Again, I didn't double count that though, because that's what I expected already. So he's my RB8 in this class. And if you watch, again, my running back breakdown video from last week, going in depth on Bucky Irving, this is pretty much exactly what I said pre-combine. So he's fine. He is what he is. Again, I get way more like Kenneth Gainwell type vibes from him where it's like good numbers in college, but I don't think his athleticism or what he really brings to the field will translate tremendously to the NFL from a fantasy perspective. He's a better real life player than he will be as a fantasy player. Now, the fastest running back at the 40-yard dash was Isaac Guerendo out of Louisville, and I'm not going to touch on him right now because I actually have not watched any film on him, and it was actually the first I've even heard of him, so maybe I'm a fucking simp. Maybe I'm an NPC for that, but now he's on my radar. At 6 foot, 221 pounds, this man ran a 4.33 40-yard dash. Okay, so I'm going to go watch his film, so you will be hearing about him from me within the coming week or 2 weeks or whatever, but he is someone that I will throw into my rankings rather soon because that was a very impressive performance by him, of course. And then you might be asking about some of the other like top guys, like Marvin Harrison Jr. did not perform anything at the combine. Malik Neighbors didn't do that. None of the top quarterbacks really did. We saw shout out Sam Hartman running the 40 2 times in a row by himself out there. And I think that was really it from the quarterbacks. Tight ends, Brock Bowers didn't do anything performance-wise. Jatavian Sanders, who was like the consensus tight end 2 out of Texas, had a relatively disappointing performance from what a lot of people thought. I think he ran a 4.67, but that's a fine range for tight ends. I think a lot of successful tight ends are in that like 4.62 to 4.69 range in terms of 40-yard speed. And it's very hard to predict tight ends coming out in terms of what actually matters because most of them put up like fucking 200 yards receiving, and then all of a sudden they're 800-yard receivers at the next level. Theo Johnson out of Penn State went fucking nuclear on his testing, had some of the best athletic testing of all time for tight ends. Now, Penn State is just known for producing insane athletic players at the NFL level. When you talk about Theo Johnson, you look at Mike Gesicki, you think of Chris Godwin, you think of Miles Sanders, Saquon Barkley, like they've all tested through the fucking roof coming out of Penn State. So I don't know how into Theo Johnson I necessarily am post-combine, but he's definitely someone to have on your radar now because of that. Okay? So probably going to wrap there. And I think the main takeaways here are that most of y'all suck at watching tape. Honestly. It just and then like combine makes people double count things tremendously. Like if you watch tape on all of these wide receivers and then you did your rankings, you ranked guys like Xavier Worthy and Troy Franklin and Brian Thomas and Xavier Legette and all of these guys according to their speed, because that was the best part of their game for the most part. And them confirming that they're fast at the 40 shouldn't do anything for you. Same things with the Trey Bensons and the MarShawn Lloyds of the world. But that's where they probably should have been before the combine. So they should stay where they're at post-combine, So Sorry if I missed anybody here. Sorry if I'm, redundant or yapping about some of the same shit that you hear me for the next 2-3 days. But listen, the Combine's one of the few events that us in Dynasty rookie land need to fucking yap about. All right. So let me have my cake. Let me eat it too. Let me eat multiple slices of it. Let me have a day. We're about to go film 6 more videos. I love you. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'm out.